Welcome to Wisconsin in Focus. I'm JD Davidson. The 2024 presidential election has dominated news cycles for the past 2 weeks, beginning with the assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump and continuing through President Biden's decision to step away from the race, which included an endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris as a Democratic nominee, to Harris's first campaign stop in Wisconsin. But a Republican Wisconsin congressman kept the focus on Biden. Joining us today is Ben Yount, Wisconsin contributor to the Center Square. Ben, tell us about Representative Derrick Van Orden and what he believes Harris should do.
Derrick Van Orden, who we've talked about a lot here on this Wisconsin in Focus podcast over the weeks, is saying out loud what an awful lot of Republicans on Capitol Hill have been saying privately for months, and what most Republicans said immediately after the president made the decision that he was going to not run for re-election. Van Orden called on the vice president to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove Biden from office. There are all manners of Republicans who've said on Twitter or when asked by their local reporters, because this was the national story. As soon as the president said he wasn't going to run again, every reporter in every state ran to their local congressman, ran to their local senator and said, "What do you think?" And many of them said, well, look, if he can't continue on, if he can't run for president, how can he be the president? And Van Orden's letter is not extraordinary in the fact that you had a Republican voice the concerns of, is the current president still of sound mind and body? It is noteworthy because Derrick Van Orden is probably one of the last people who would ever want to see Kamala Harris become president of the United States. I think the two of them don't agree on hardly any of the issues. Van Orden is a very pro-Trump Republican and Kamala Harris is Kamala Harris. But he wrote in his letter, and we quoted it in the story, "I write to you with a profound sense of urgency regarding the President of the United States' ability to perform his constitutional duties as Chief Executive and Commander of Chief. As the leader of the free world, it is paramount that the President is both of sound mind and body. It is readily apparent that President Biden is neither." And this is something that we're not going to get a final answer to. Just how sick is President Biden? He spoke to the nation on Wednesday night saying that while he is no longer running, he is not leaving office. But to add the counterbalance to that, the fact check, as they say in the papers, this also was a president who was saying up until about a week and a half ago that there was no way he was dropping out. So the president's claim to the nation that he is going to finish his term, serve it out, and cement his legacy, that too could change because, as Van Orden said, it's clear that there is something that is wrong with President Biden.
Well, and we wrote on the Center Square the day before a story out of West Virginia where the Attorney General wrote the same letter. Now, it wasn't his first letter. He has written a couple of these over the past few months asking Harris to invoke the 25th Amendment. But I can't help but think Biden's staff or handlers didn't help this kind of conversation when his announcement was made on social media and nobody saw or heard from him for days. It wasn't LBJ saying, "I will not accept the party's nomination" in front of black and white TV cameras. Nobody knew where he was. Nobody knew how he was. Nobody really knew what was going on.
You've got to remember that up until right before the debate, you had the Biden administration, including his spokesperson, including Kamala Harris, the vice president, now the presidential candidate. You had reports out of Washington, D.C. from trusted media sources that no, President Biden's fine. He just gets a little tired. Hey, yeah, he's an 80-something-year-old guy, but no, he's sharp as a tack. You remember the stories, I think it was earlier this year, where they were saying, oh, in meetings, Joe's just rapid fire questions. He's on top of it. He just, he doesn't show that side of him. I remember either Bill Maher or Jon Stewart or both mocking that claim, saying essentially, hey, if that's how he is, maybe you could show it to the people. So you're exactly right. When there was a tweet that said, I'm no longer running, And just the day before, the president had been rushed out of Nevada because of a COVID diagnosis, and he was recuperating at his beach house in Delaware. There wasn't enough of an opportunity. That's the best way to put it. An opportunity to question this. And you know how this works in the used to be 24-hour news cycle. Now it's a constant every second news cycle thanks to Twitter. But whenever there is that gap, whenever there are those unanswered questions, people start to fill in answers on their own. And yeah, it was a very short step from, well, if he's not on TV, is he even alive? Do we have proof that Joe Biden's even alive? And off to the races we went.
Well, all of this has led to Harris being the presumptive nominee. And she was in Wisconsin. Her first campaign stop as a presidential candidate was in Wisconsin earlier this week.
West Allis Central High School, if you were trying to figure, because I know we spent the day before trying to figure out exactly
where it was going to be and when it was going to be.
That was a TBD announcement for only certain people. But she came and she spoke to a packed house and they lapped it up. But most of her speech is what we've heard before. Very pro-abortion, very pro-union. She talked about federally subsidized childcare and paid family leave. And what she said was retirement with dignity. And in the days since, almost the consensus from the political punditry class here in Wisconsin is that Harris came to Wisconsin to make sure that she shored up the base, that she kept progressive Democrats who'd been worried about Joe Biden. She got them back on the team bus. And moving forward, the question continues to be, where do independent voters go? And this is now July and things are much different than they were. But if you go back to the Marquette Law School poll from May, the pollsters there asked about the favorability, unfavorability of a number of political leaders. Donald Trump had a 41% approval rating. President Biden had, I want to say, a 36% approval rating. And Kamala Harris had only a 33% approval rating. She was the least popular. When you took a look at her gap between favorable and unfavorable, she was the least popular. She was underwater by 24 points here in Wisconsin. And that's not just Republicans. That's Republicans and Democrats. So while she has gotten the bump for not being Joe, it remains to be seen just how much people like Kamala Harris. And now you're seeing, particularly here in the battlegrounds, commercials pointing out, hey, this is what Kamala Harris supported when she was running for president the last time. More people coming into the country, more federal spending, more and more abortion. And they're asking the question, is that something you want out of your president here in 2024?
Well, we know how important Wisconsin will be in November. We'll certainly be talking about this more and more. And Ben, thanks for joining us today. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.